Welcome to Unit 3, and we'll be looking at the schools of thought. Particularly, we'll be focusing on the bioecological model, the asset model, and then, of course, the move from the medical to the social model, which is all very much intertwined. I'm going to try to keep this video as short as possible because I know we have a lot of constraints around things like data usage and time. So this is really just to explain some of the work that you've already covered in this unit, and then to help you also understand how all of this fits together when you need to do your assessments, and of course when you need to move on from this unit with a good understanding and a good grounding in the work that has been covered. So let's get started. So from what you read, you should have grasped the fact that we have been historically working within the medical model. And so the medical model is what we understand, for example, when we go to the doctor, is that we find the problem. So what is the problem? Either we have tumor, for example, we have a pain, we have a virus, whatever it is, that is the problem. So the doctor will focus on the problem. So the medical model has been the way that we've worked for years. It has been applied not only to physical ailments, but also challenges in terms of neurological challenges, learning difficulties, the inability to cope at school has all been focused upon by using a medical model lens. So today, or in our current situation, we are moving away from the medical model, which is focusing on the problem and making the child the problem, and we're moving towards a social model. So the social model is a lot more inclusive, and it looks at the child as an individual with a barrier to learning. Whereas, remember, the medical model says the child is the problem, the child can't learn, the child can't process. The social model is saying this is the child, and the child has a processing challenge. So, for example, when we talk about in inclusive education, we don't talk about a handicapped child. We talk about a child with a disability or a child who experiences a disability. So within the medical model, the child is the faulty element, if you can call it that. We, in terms of the social model, we look at the child as being the center of everything we do, and the child is valued. Then the medical model, a diagnosis is made of the child. As the social model, we don't focus on the challenge. We focus on the strengths, and we focus on what the child is able to do. The child is not labeled as in the medical model, but rather in the social model, we look at what the barriers are and what are the solutions that we can put in place to help the child overcome their challenge. So it's really like giving the child the step up that they need to be able to perform at a similar level to others or to meet the criteria, but by providing them with the support that they need. So this is a very good representation of the differences between the medical model and the social model. The medical model is very much old school teaching. Every child is given the same type of work, expected to do things exactly the same, right from the board, be quiet, and just do what the teacher tells him to do. Whereas in the social model, the child is valued. The experience is important, the relationship is important, the child's differences and diversity is welcome and it's celebrated. We're different, so let's experience our differences, let's talk about our differences. And in this way, society evolves. It becomes a better place, a more safe place. And it's not about control as in traditional teaching. And I'm not knocking traditional teaching, there's a lot of good in it as well. But in terms of us really focusing on, not all teachers have not focused on the relationships, but today's child needs a relationship to hold to be able to learn, as did every child across history. But today we understand that the relationship is really the foundation upon which you can build. So the mindset shift in educational psychology is moving away from making the child the problem to working to a more systems approach where the whole system is involved in considering support or understanding what needs the child needs in terms of support. So in the child deficit model, it's all about assessing, giving tests, finding problems. What is the problem? How do we diagnose the child? How do we label the child? How do we find a cure for the child's problem? They don't consider the context. It's very individually focused. How do we find the solution to this child's problem? Whereas the systems approach is more about prevention. How do we prevent challenges from occurring? How do we promote health? How are we supportive? How do we work together in a collaborative way? It's person focused, yes, but it also considers the impact of the context. Does the fact that the child comes from a previously disadvantaged group affect the child? Does the fact that the child comes from a home where there was one parent affect the child? Does it affect the child that that there's violent crimes in the community, that there's trauma in the family, that there has been loss? All of this is considered in the systems approach. We look at the child within the system. And that is a perfect segue to the bioecological model. Now, the bioecological model, which is Bronfenbrenner, Yuri Bronfenbrenner, was the person who established the bioecological model. And he spoke about the various levels that we need to consider when we are looking at a child. So let's use, for example, a case study, or use an example. This child, Johnny, well, everyone uses Johnny, so we'll say Johnny is the individual. He's a boy, he's 12 years old, he's in good health, he lives with his family. So in his microsystem is his family. Every one of us has a microsystem. So our family is in our microsystem, our school, our friends, the neighborhood we come from, the church group, and the health services that we are able to access within our system. Around the microsystem is the mesosystem, and the mesosystem is really how the microsystem and the exosystem, how they respond to each other. What is the effect on the one on the other, and how do they interact? So the exosystem here outside is the friends of the family, mass media, social welfare services, legal services, and neighbors, how these impact on you as the individual. Remember, mass media does affect the child. So if in mass media at the moment, there's a lot of talk about violence, a lot of negative talk that will filter into the family system, it will filter into the peer group where there's a lot of violence being viewed, and the effect of violence on children, we know as studies show, is quite negative. That's going to affect Johnny. So do you see how all of these levels are affecting Johnny? So I'm going through this very quickly, and we're going to be talking about the model in a bit more detail hereafter. The macro system is attitudes and ideology of the culture. So what does the culture say? That boys, for example, should be more educated than girls, that boys have a say more than girls, that boys can't cry, that boys have to be strong. So all of these affect the way that Johnny experiences the world. Then the last system here, or the system that runs throughout, is the chrono system. And the chrono system is about time. It's about changes over time. How do all of these change? How do these changes affect Johnny? If Johnny was 12 years old during the time of apartheid, how did he change from 12 to today, 2020, where he now experiences a very different type of life to what is experienced when he was 12 years old? So that's just a quick example of what the bioecological model and how it is applied to individuals. So it's important for you to really understand these levels and understand how they affect each other. So, for example, in the exosystem, although the exosystem does not have a direct impact on the child, it does affect the child in many ways. So, if say for example, Johnny's dad is part of his family. So Johnny's dad works at a huge IT firm. And so the IT firm would fall in the exosystem because Johnny doesn't have really an interaction with the exosystem, which is Johnny's dad's job, which is the IT firm. So the IT firm goes through trouble and they start retrenching people. One of those people could be Johnny's dad. So Johnny's dad is very stressed. He doesn't want to lose his job. If he loses his job, it will affect everything else in the microsystem. So this stress comes into the home through Johnny's dad. Johnny's dad and mom start fighting and arguing, and this then filters down to the relationship with the kids. The kids can feel the stress. Everyone's on their nerves. This affects Johnny. Johnny goes to school and isn't able to concentrate and work. So can you see how the exosystem, which is not in direct contact with Johnny, affects Johnny as well, because it has an impact on the way he lives his life. So the bioecological model is really a way of considering a child, looking at a child, and understanding all of the impacts that affect the child and make the child act in a specific way. So I am running through this because I don't want to, I want you to spend too much time on this video because you will really read a lot of the literature. And this is for me just to give you an overall picture. So an asset approach, it focuses on the individual strengths. It's very strength focused. And as you can see in the name asset, what are our assets? It looks at the resources and capacities of people, and it looks at everybody as having a specific gift and something to contribute. It talks about the opportunities a person has, the aptitudes that they have, which is the abilities, and it talks about how we can use these to best serve not only our purpose but the purpose in our society as well. There's a lot of literature in talking about moving from a deficit approach to an asset approach. So this little table really gives you an idea of what this could mean for us as a people. So we are at a deficit approach, which I think of it as a negative mindset. So it's not a growth mindset, it's a negative mindset. We can look at things in a positive or negative way. So we start with the deficits or the needs in the community. We always look at the deficiencies. What is the problem? What is something that's not working? Instead, why don't we look at the assets in the community? There's a lot of literature about communities that have done this, that have made a huge impact on the mindset of the people, but also on the environment, on the resources existing in that community. If we just change the way we look at the world, if a principal looks at his school and instead of saying this teacher's doing a bad thing, that teacher's doing a bad thing, but rather says this teacher is really doing a really amazing job in mathematics, let's all look at what this teacher is doing. It will motivate people to want to do more, to want to be more, to give more in the environment. It's important for us to understand the deficit and asset approach really affects people. You can use it in your home, you can use it in your friendships, you can use it in any part of your life. Imagine using the asset model in your classroom, looking at your kids and thinking, what is your strength? How do I motivate you? How do I inspire you? How do I make you feel as if you have something to contribute? It will be so powerful to have something like this in your classroom space. Within assets and within the community, there are many areas where we can look at positives and assets. It's just something that we really have to change the way we think, change the way we consider. So I'm talking very broad here, but I want you to think about how you can apply this within your community and within the various settings within which you live. I'm not going to go through all of this, but it's just again a refresher. I like to add refreshers as much as I possibly can in terms of it talks about educational psychology and how it guides teaching. And these are some of the ways in which it guides teaching. It helps us to look at our students in a very specific way. So if every time I'm engaging with you, I'm going to try to remind you about educational psychology, because at this point you should have a working idea of what it's about. But oftentimes we need to check that understanding as we progress. And because we're focusing on the biological model and the asset model, you may sometimes forget where you are in the what is the subject all about. This is just to bring it all together for you. So just a reminder of where we are. And I want to talk about something next very interesting that you may not link automatically, but I think it's a link that I want to make for you. I want to talk to you about trauma and learning, because we've considered Bronfenbrenner, we've considered the asset approach. So we need to understand how trauma and learning affects our learners. And so this is also a school of thought, it's also a way of thinking, and it's also incorporated in the Bronfenbrenner systems theory or the biological model. And so trauma is something that can affect a child from the various systems and levels in their life. So when you see a child that is experiencing, or you see the child as having challenging behavior, some of it could be related to trauma. Trauma affects our children. So just to go back to this model very quickly, trauma could be happening in the family, in the school. It could be happening in the neighborhood, in legal services, in social welfare systems, in the clinics. Friends and family, definitely. There's mass trauma happening all the time. We are currently in traumatic situations in our country as well. So these affect children in many ways. Children can have a difficulty self-regulating. So they're jumping all over the place. They're talking all the time. They can have trouble with memory, poor impulse control. They don't know when to do things and when not to do things. Aggression. Somatic symptoms like headaches, pains, gastro pains, trouble interpreting emotional signs. All of these things I want you to understand as things that your children could present with that indicate a trauma in their life. So they may not be doing something because they are naughty. They may be doing something because they're responding to the trauma in their life. And I want you, if nothing else, I want you to take this away. When you look at children, don't see them as naughty or misbehaving. Think about what may be happening in their lives that is causing them to react this way. I hope this video was helpful. I hope it brought some value to you, and I hope it helped you to make sense of everything that you've been reading. Thank you, guys.